Flow with the show. Hey, this is Flow with the Show, episode number 8. 8 is great. We have an extra special episode today. I feel like I say that every episode because they are special in their own way. But especially today, we are back up at this beautiful summer cabin. And for the first time ever, I have not one guest, but 2 guests.
Yay!
We have a million cameras, a million microphones, and some beautiful, spirited people with me here today. So thank you guys so much for being here. STRANJAH, my beautiful friend, music producer, music educator, content creator, amazing human. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I feel like I'm in a very serene space here, and I feel like we're kind of in a Jedi council here. Yeah. We're positioned in a triangular formation here. Yeah. I think we're going to have a really good chat.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, we've got like a circle kind of vibe going on here. This is cool.
All we're missing is that little sponge ball that we throw around.
Oh, yeah, like who holds the stick is he who talks. Yeah. Tyr, welcome to the show again. Tyr Kohout, music producer, DJ, audio engineer, all around video, photo guy, my vocal engineer, man of many talents. Thank you again for being here.
Of course.
So we had Tyr in the last episode and got to know him a little bit more. Some stories that I myself had never heard, even though we know each other really well. So that was super cool. And STRANJAH, Alan, was the very first guest. Episode number 1, Flow with the Show. So this is pretty cool to have you back as well, especially in this context. We're up here having a Deviant audio crew retreat type of thing away from our studios, immersing ourselves in nature and good conversation and relaxation. So thought we can't relax too hard. We should film a podcast episode.
We should spend 3 hours setting up a session.
Yeah.
Why not?
We never waste a good opportunity to put out some good content out there. Yeah. And what a place to do it at, right?
Yeah, I hope you can see, you can probably see in some of our backgrounds, there's like lake water, there's like grass, and not the usual like just studio gear vibe, as cool as I like that. We're literally flowing with the lake of the show.
We're flowing, we're showing.
We're flowing. I love that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is, the 3 of us, for those listening in, we work together in a lot of different contexts. So I thought maybe because this is sort of like a Deviant audio crew kind of thing, I thought maybe I'd perhaps give a little bit of context for those that don't know. Deviant Audio is a label founded by our homie STRANJAH over here. What? Over the years, Deviant has released some incredible music and some really exciting things to come. Tyr and I have our own involvement in separate ways with helping the label, and so that's sort of our vibe here as well. We've also released music on the label as artists, so that's been a really incredible opportunity. Honestly, Alan, like our first release schema together was such a, I know it's a small label, but it's so special, and I was so grateful for that opportunity, and even having like the Toronto CN Tower like on the artwork and stuff too made it even nicer.
Yeah, I love when we put our efforts together. It seems like there's this synergy, this creative energy. When we put our heads together, something great can happen, and even like today. So
yeah, man.
Honored to be working with you both. You both are very hardworking, very bright, talented, and creative. And great things can happen when you meet people that are like-minded, that share the same goals and visions, that are moving in a similar direction. Great things can happen. So message out to anyone out there, if you're feeling a bit down, you're not really moving, find people that you can support, that you can vibe with and build, because it's much easier to build when you have people to work and grow together. So
you're so right. It can be such a lonely road, especially if you're a musician that's not, for example, in a band where you're already like inherently like in a group of people. I remember one of my early experiences with music was, I'd spent many years practicing classical piano on my own. So it's just you and the piano. And then, the strict Russian teacher comes along once a week and yells at me because I'm not that good. And then, years later, my very first experiences of like jamming with other people. It's like, oh, you're a musician, I'm a musician. Let's just like jam together. And even at that moment, it was like the concept of like collaborating with someone was so foreign to me. But I remember the experience of like, working on something creative with another person just did feel so much more fun. And I remember thinking to myself, like, in the future, years later, if I were to ever, even for example, like tour, it would be nice to not be on the stage by myself. Now, that said, I think the experience of like being a musician in whatever form, even if you are a solo musician, solo DJ, whatever, there are always so many people around you that like it takes so many people to make something come together, whether it's releasing music, you have all the label people who work at the distribution company, maybe people that are doing the artwork. If you're doing shows, it's like all these people coming together to like put on the show. So you never really are alone, even when you feel like it. So I definitely agree with you in that, like, you should kind of always look to, I guess, like, yeah, connecting with other people along this journey of creativity. Kind of.
100%. Yeah, your team kind of makes you who you are sometimes. Mm-hmm. You can't do everything you want to do on your own. But that doesn't mean you can't be independent and do a lot of stuff on your own accord too, because I think the great thing about teamwork is that you all benefit when you do well. And you can all bring each other up in the same way. If you have a really innovative idea, if you have a new approach, or if you have a refinement to an existing approach, or you can find some way to contribute value, you're not singularly the one who benefits from that. And if everyone is constantly bringing each other up in that way, it makes finding inspiration for that other person even easier. Because it's very clear why the team functions well. When one person has success, that pays off, helps everybody out. You think to yourself, okay, well, it's my turn now to carry the weight, see what I can do to increase our value, and then you can all, under an ideal circumstance of being a good team, you can all essentially just uplift each other constantly. And that's why it's so important when you do meet good, motivated, honest, respectful people that you keep them close by. We had a conversation last night along the same lines of you have to be very precious about the great people that you meet, because it's every so often that you might, there's a lot of exceptional people out there, but there's a lot of places you can be in this world too. You might not ever run across that perfect person that you have in your mind because they might be 5,000 miles away. But if you're paying attention, your eyes are open, you're always looking for opportunities, you're always open to new things, being adaptable. Chances are you run into someone who can work well with you and you can both improve each other as well. And that can keep scaling outward if you're both now interested in meeting great people. And that's how great networks start and continue to grow.
Yeah. One thing about that is, for those out there that might think about that and wonder what I want to maintain my artistic independence. And that's totally fine. You can have your own zone where you're building yourself and who you are as an artist. Just understand that in this business, in the end, you're not just working alone. Like Anna mentioned, there will be other people that you come across that you're going to have to cooperate with if you want to grow in this industry professionally. So I think the key is learning how to be a team worker and understanding what your goals and vision is, how to communicate that with each other, and learning about what the other person's goals and visions are, and how can we align and move together, right?
That's so important to have a shared vision and a shared compass. Basically, and that all comes down to communication. Communication is the number one thing. And it's, I have thought this for many years, that sometimes talent even comes second to good communication. Because if you're easy to work with and you're someone that people like being around you because you have good energy, you always have good suggestions or good input, or you're just very helpful, like, oh, how can I help? How can I contribute? That type of thing. And you're not just saying it to be heard, saying it, like, you do genuinely follow through on that. I'll add that caveat. But if you are someone who's consistently looking to contribute value, it doesn't even necessarily matter if you have the skill right this very second, if you demonstrate an aptitude towards learning and willingness to change your approach and to learn from the people in your life, that can take you so far as compared to coming to something thinking you know everything. You don't. And not being open to changing your approach in life based on other people's input, i.e. getting feedback. That's the number one thing, is taking that feedback well and having the gumption to give other people feedback where it's appropriate too. Like, hey, I noticed this thing. I feel like this can be proven this way. What do you think? Instead of just barking that at someone else, like, no, you should change this, this, and this, and not giving any context in terms of why they should change that. It's that two-way communication that really makes a successful team and a relationship.
Yeah, the feedback thing is it's an interesting topic as well, because this is something that I've had sort of various learning experiences that have evolved through my journey around feedback, which is like, yes, you should be open to feedback and hear a bunch of people's advice, but at the end of the day, it's still you that should make a decision and be discerning. And sometimes the feedback that you're going to get isn't actually, rarely, but once in a while, sometimes that feedback isn't actually the right call. And I wanted to bring up this example because it's very kind of topical. Deviant, as the label, is going to be releasing my next single from my debut album, River Flows.
Great job on that track, by the way.
Thank you. Yes, it's a huge really special project for me, and so this is a track with Nympho. And just a little bit of the backstory with that track specifically is that I had originally, with Tyr, we recorded that vocal for a completely different song, completely different kind of instrumental, and then it went to the label that it was supposed to be on, and they'd actually said, we don't like certain elements of this vocal, and the elements they were talking about was the song itself has a little bit more of my, sometimes I go into my like rap MC kind of style, spoken word style, and they didn't really dig it. Totally fine, artist subjective, but there was something about it where I was like, you know what, this is one of those times where I actually think maybe not that I don't want to say that they're wrong, but for me, I wanted to hold on to the vocal. And usually when a label asks me to change something in a track, I will, because, I want to be agreeable. I want to do, for the shared vision. But in this particular case, I was like, you know what? I feel like they're wrong, and like I want to hold on to this vocal, and we're not going to release it on this label. Didn't end up releasing it with the original producer and instrumental. So I had this vocal, and then many months later, I had sent it to Nympho saying, like, do you think you might be interested in like coming up with an instrumental for this? And so he completely changed the arrangement. The vibe in the instrumental is completely different, and at the end of the day, we're left with this song that I'm so happy it worked out in this way, because it just feels like one of my most special projects, and it was because I respectfully declined to take the feedback at that time. Yeah. So it's just an interesting thing where, like, yeah, you should 9 times out of 10 take feedback and, be agreeable, but once in a while you kind of gotta hold your ground when it comes to certain decisions, or rather at the end of the day, still make your own decision.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, feedback is only about opening up your perspective about different options. In the end, it is still your artistic decision, and you have to do what's right for you. You have to follow your vision, your instinct on something. You have to listen to that inner voice when you make that decision. When it comes down to it, feedback is just feedback. You have to take that for what it is and analyze the various options and find what's right for you.
Yeah,
well said. Yeah, and I would argue even in that case you did take the feedback, you just didn't apply it.
Right.
Because ultimately you were listening, you were willing to consider a different perspective, and you as an artist decided that would violate the integrity of what your vision was too much to then make it what they were looking for. So in the end, the right decision was to just keep it as it was, figure it out later, and I would argue that was for the best.
Yeah.
Because I really think actually the instrumental that Bardo wrote for you was a perfect fit. So far, the people who have heard it at the time of this filming have been really, really enthusiastic about it. They've loved what they've been hearing. I think it's great. I know Alan really likes it as well. So really, maybe it was supposed to happen this way.
I think so.
So serendipitous that in this case that when you decided that your artistic integrity was number one and you couldn't deviate too much from that in actuality, that worked out better for you because you made the right call.
I agree 100%, and it makes me realize too, like I have a very similar example of when things went the other way, which is had a similar thing where, and I guess I'm just trying to like inject my like MC style here and there, and sometimes it works and sometimes it's not appropriate, but we were talking about this the other day too, where my older collab with Edland called Moonlight came out on Liquicity. In that original track, I also had a vocal that was a little bit more of like a rappy verse, and they're like, you know what, we don't really think that this is like a fit, and I'm like, you know what, okay, that's okay, I'll try not to take it personal, took it out, changed some things, and we were seeing the other day, it's like one of my highest streamed tracks on Spotify, and I personally still like don't fully get why that resonated so much with people, because I think I've had some better work, but this is an example of me taking the label's feedback, and it worked out in the end because more people actually liked it.
It comes down case by case. Again, you just got to follow your instinct and feel it out in terms of what is right for this particular situation.
And it's funny too, because let me know your guys' experience with this as well, but it's often the case that the tracks that you don't personally identify with the most are often the ones that people end up identifying with. I've heard that from David Draymond of Disturbed fame all the way down to every artist I've talked to. It seems like just the tracks that you're least connected to are the ones that are most available to be into the world somehow. Maybe there's something to be said about that, by the way. Of how, when a track is done, it's no longer yours, or that kind of, I know it's superstitious thinking, but it's that kind of idea of now that you have managed to export the track out of your computer and upload it and it's out of your life, it really and truly is out of your life. It's not your track anymore. It belongs to the world at large and to the art sphere at large, and sometimes maybe there's something to be said about how the track that you have really and truly let go of like, no, this 0% belongs to me anymore. Maybe there's something to be said about how you've really allowed it to be in the world, and sometimes that has an effect on how much people identify with that track because you've completely released it out of your artistic endeavors. Just my 2 cents.
It's an interesting perspective. I kind of see it more like you never really know what's going to be a commercial success. And sometimes you can think like, yes, there are certain things where like, things will be more probable to be more commercially acceptable than not. But it seems to me like in history with music, with business products, a lot of the times it's like, it just happens to be a commercial mainstream success, and who knew, like it wasn't planned to be that way. And then funny enough, when you do plan, like major record labels will plan to like make something a commercial success, then it doesn't work out because then there's something that's not like an inherent artistic iconic spark or whatever, because they're just trying to emulate what was a commercial hit before. So who knows?
I can definitely relate because I've done a number of studio farts which became commercial successes, and it was I did this one track. I'm not going to name it for now because don't want to get there, but I intentionally said I'm gonna just fart and just see what happens, and it became a commercial success. I was like, whoa, is that how easy it is? Maybe I should just keep farting.
Those, my friends, are words to live by.
That's the one clip I'm going to take from this.
Do you think we can put that in a really beautiful font?
Oh, absolutely.
Below your profile picture with all this like art deco.
Just keep farting.
Yeah.
Secret to success.
It is so bizarre and interesting though that like you point out that like we have to, at the end of the day, like sometimes art is about having fun and exploring, and we talk about this often where like I catch myself
sometimes.
Yes, and I so often catch myself like taking things too seriously and continuing to try to force something that's just not working, and then having to step back and to think like, okay, I'm supposed to be exploring, and then you see so many artists that are also just experimenting and that kind of thing, and then that's what helps them like just have more fun and be more fulfilled, and then it ends up resonating more because it's more genuine and authentic. Like
I think that's really what it is. You're just letting go of any preconceptions. I'm just here. I'm just gonna have fun. I'm gonna do whatever and not overthink it and see what happens here. And a lot of the times, that's when magic happens in the studio. When you don't have any preconceived expectations. You're just there. you're present in the moment, in the situation, in the studio, and you're just open. I call it open to the pool of infinite possibilities, right? So
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Because if you're sitting there thinking, how am I going to make this perfect song? You've already failed.
Yeah.
You've tried to contrive this ideal notion of what your art is. That's a very unknowable thing. Your art changes all the time, actually. So I think the best thing you can do for your art is just to let it evolve in whatever direction that makes sense and follow. This is like the other podcast we did, is to constantly be following your inspiration and building what it was that already makes you a great artist, but then tacking on another interesting layer to that to see where it might take you. And the thing with learning how to make music, I think a lot of people's experience is that they feel a lot of their best work sometimes ends up being behind them, and that their easiest inspiration also ends up being behind them, despite having a wealth of knowledge on how to write songs and how to produce songs and content and how to sound design and do all these types of things. And ironically, you end up being fruitless when you get stuck in your wealth of knowledge. And it was through this unknown of wanting to take the next step in the dark cave of how do I do blah in Ableton is actually when you learn that technique, it gets baked into your song, and then the whole song is kind of based around that thing that you just learned. But then when you don't feel like you have anything to learn, where are you going to go next? And so keeping an open mind to just being there to create and to do stuff is the number one priority, because if your goal is to constantly be making better music all the time, at some point you will plateau, I promise. You will get as good as you can get at mixing, you will get as good as you can get at writing riffs and little things like that. So try not to take it too seriously, because really, you're not out of ideas. You're in a moment right now where you might feel like, I don't have an idea right this very second. That's totally fine. You're gonna have a month where you might not have any ideas. So don't let this be the one thing that, now I guess I can't write music anymore because I don't have the inspiration right now. I really want to make a great track right now. But that deferred gratification of, you know what, I'm going to keep coming back to this. I'm going to keep trying to find my momentum. I'm going to find my momentum all sorts of different ways. And Alan, I'd love to know your experience on this, but I find probably 10-1 the most inspiring thing for writing cool riffs and taking tracks in different directions, honestly, is just talking to and working with other artists. But I'd like to know your experience on that.
Yeah, for sure. There definitely can be, as I said, synergy when you have someone in the studio that you vibe with. We talk about this a lot. That other person may not have to be even creatively active in that space, but just having that other person, it's almost like there's this hive mind happening there, because you're conscious that there's another person there experiencing the session. So somehow you may, I wonder if you may make like decisions that you normally wouldn't make if you were alone, right? I wonder if that makes sense
that
to you
totally
guys.
Makes sense. And I've experienced that before writing music at your place. Punishment was written at your place almost 99% of it. I mixed it and whatever at home. But I don't write Bushman like steppers like that normally, but it was the vibe of being in your place and having all of your influence and all the posters and the different speakers and the different setup and different sample libraries, different synths, different processors and all that kind of thing. And I've written quite a few tracks that sound nothing like what I normally write at your studio. So I absolutely agree. I think this is a studied phenomenon, by the way.
I was going to say, it seems to me that something that like, and this is me getting more into like the spiritual zone, but I do feel like you're probably picking up on that other person's energy and vibe, and you're literally like, like not just alone in your own vibe. You're now like the mixing of like other people's presence literally affects, you know, the vibe. I'm going to say vibe like 4 more times.
I think I think empathy there plays a role, like understanding the other person and feeling that energy and feeding off it. It's a lot like DJing. I may play much better sets when I have people to interact with, because there's almost this feedback loop. If I play a track and I see a response, I can pick up on what should come next, that kind of thing. So I think in terms of studio sessions, that can work similarly.
You're 100% right,
Yeah.
especially about DJing.
Yeah.
I cannot play to an empty room. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I can't practice on my own either. It's just not going to work for me.
Yeah.
It's too clinical. It's too technical.
Yeah.
It's too dead.
Yeah.
Like all of this, like a big live, loud PA speakers and all the equipment for DJing, that's meant to be enjoyed with other people.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing, by the way, as smoking and doing drugs on your own. Of like, what's the point of that other than just being addicted to it?
I enjoyed it alone back in the day, but
sure, but I sort of heard that
it's problematic.
Yeah, it's kind of a saying that goes around of like if you only do stuff like that for the enjoyment and kind of group type of thing for other people, then it ends up possibly being a good experience for you. But it's when you take it outside of the experience and you're just doing it for the chemical hit, is when you're probably not coming at it from the right angle. And I think music, because we're creatures and we kind of respond similarly to different situations, there's probably something to be said about just us being group creatures and needing the support of your fellow man, essentially. You can exist isolated for a time, but there will come a point where you need to show your music to other people, where you need to release it, get it out into the world. There's no reason why that line can't transcend the making of the music itself. Even if it's just, your significant other, maybe they're not a musician, but they just come into the room, checking out your stuff, that kind of thing. You might be more critical of stuff that's something you were ignoring for a long time. And you'll be self-conscious of, what, maybe this lyric or maybe this riff that I put in there, maybe it's not quite the catchy thing that I, just in my own little bubble, thought it was going to be.
Right, because you're now literally starting to hear things from another person's perspective because you're literally self-conscious. There's another consciousness perceiving like what's happening.
Yes, 100%.
I've definitely experienced the reverse benefit. So what's the opposite of benefit? Pros and cons. The cons of like having another person's presence in the room, and it's my whole thing around like the performance anxiety with singing, where I feel very comfortable singing on my own. I'm singing all the time, I'm practicing all the time, and then as soon as there's one other human being in the room, let alone like a crowd or even like like an audience through like a stream where they're not even in the room, but like I feel the presence of like people watching, it just completely like chemically changes like my physical reaction to it, and I can't calm my heart down, like I'm nervous, and so it's like a physical thing that happens when there is other human beings present. Alan, I was realizing that like in our last podcast episode that you joined me, I had a whole bunch of sort of questions prepared, and I loved our conversation, and we got into a lot of sort of more present day stuff and, effects of the pandemic and that kind of thing. And one of the questions that I didn't get to that I'd love to sort of get into a little bit now is your like early days getting into music. I don't actually know sort of how you were interested in music in the first place and your growth, because when I first discovered you, you were already kind of one of the most, in my eyes, like legendary Toronto producers that came out of Canada. And I remember when I first discovered drum and bass, you were one of the only Canadian names I ever saw in like track lists and that kind of thing, and having had releases on labels. So I was always like so proud of you and like admired you from afar, and then so having met you and then becoming friends with you, and over time starting to work with you more and more has been like a really really big honor for me. And I'd love to sort of take it back to like your early days and what kind of got you into music, and what were those early days like?
Yeah, well, first off, that's very humbling to hear that. I definitely appreciate it when I hear people like yourself respect what I've done. Sometimes I almost don't think so highly of myself, so it's nice to hear that feedback. When it comes to my own music and how I got started, I think I've always been interested in music ever since I was very young. There has always been an interest in listening and liking good music. My dad was really into music. My mother was really into music. My dad had a really nice vinyl collection.
Wow.
He had really good records from like the Bee Gees, Madonna, ABBA. So I was exposed to early kind of disco / pre-electronic music, and I've always gravitated to more electronic beats. When I heard an electronic beat, whether it's Depeche Mode or some other kind of like African Bambata back in the day, I was like really just intrigued by that hypnotic beat, and no other style of music has ever resonated with me, and that has always been like that for me ever since at a very young age, like 4 or 5 years old, just loving electronic based beats. It's something about it just sounded, I didn't even know what it was, but I just knew it sounded futuristic, like it was really out there, even at a young age. And that interest of music has always been with me. And my parents bought us a Yamaha keyboard when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. It's this like 2-octave little thing with various PCM sounds, and I used to it had this like automatic drum beat thing, so you can turn on this drum beat, and I would used to like make little melodies. I didn't know musical notation at that time. I didn't know anything about music. I just knew if I press this key and then this key, that sounds nice. So I just and so I created my own notation method. I just numbered the keys. I was like, all right, if I hit 1, 3, 5, 4, that might sound good. And if you hit it in this rhythm, that might be a cool song. So that was my first inkling into like writing music. I was probably like 8 or 9 years old, and so I have always been interested in the process of writing music. However, I did go into a band in junior high, but never really resonated with like academic music education. I was more into just learning things on my own. I was just more into what I was into, right? So it was not until later on I discovered Euro dance music in the 90s and Ace of Base. That's when I think things started to open. I started to really then, I was probably 12, 13 years old. That's when I started to really discover music on my own, going out there and looking for music. And I was probably going into grade 9. That's when, from Euro dance, that's my first, I guess, introduction to official dance music. And then a friend of mine from junior high lent me this Warehouse CD, this house music CD with like a 10-track of classic house music from like the Bucketheads, Armin van Helden, Josh Wing, and it just sounded so foreign to me at that time. I was like, this is so different from what I've grown up to, but it has a similar beat. It sounds futuristic, yet it sounds very raw. What is this? I need to learn more about this. And that's when I discovered what was, I guess, underground music that isn't commercially available, but if you dig around, you can find it. Or if you listen to late night radio at like 12 or 1 a.m. on college radio, you'll hear these foreign exotic beats, which was so just intriguing to me. And I was just hooked to the style of music. And since I had an interest in making music, I had to find out, how do you make this music? I want to do this. This is the stuff I want to do. And then one thing led to another. I found some mentors in Toronto. They showed me a few, I guess, showed me my first steps into learning various early software. And that's pretty much how I got started.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that there's a lot of overlap with how you got into electronic music and how I got into electronic music.
Okay.
In the last episode, I only remembered through just kind of going through the memory bank further and further of that. I too also got a keyboard when I was really young. Yeah. It was a Casio SK1. Okay. I won't rehash the whole thing, but basically it's a sampling keyboard with 1.4 seconds of sampling on it. Ooh. I know, it's so much. Wow. And you could transpose the samples. You could play up to 4 notes at once. Yeah. And you could also have a drum machine in the background. Crazy. So I didn't really have a concept of the music either, but I just kind of started, messing around with the keys, see what kind of sounds are like, because there's like an organ sound, piano sound. But the sampling was really what anyone cared about on an SK1. And all sorts of obscene sounds.
What did you sample?
Anything really.
Wow.
It would be toilets flushing to various things that you can find around the house, lawnmowers, telephones ringing, just to see how they sound and transposed all sorts of different pitches.
Like literally farting around in the studio.
Literally farting around.
Yeah.
So there was that going on.
Yeah.
And then I think my very first exposure, because as you were saying, you know, when you got your warehouse CD, I thought, oh, that's good. When did I first hear like house music or anything that wasn't strictly analog based?
Yeah.
It's probably All Stars 2000.
Okay.
Would have been the first time I heard that.
Okay. What was on there?
Oh man.
Friday night, I like the way you move.
I love that.
It's like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Kicking myself for not being able to remember any particular artist. If you just Google All Stars 2000, you'll find that CD for sure.
Yeah.
It's a silver, like, what's it called when it has that, like, the colors that kind of come through when you turn it left and right?
Holographic?
Yeah, kind of like a holographic CD sort of thing. Not Tiesto, but that type of sound was on there, where it was that early sampled drum sound type of thing. And I remember hearing that as like a very, very small kid. Would have been only like, I guess because 2000 would have come in 1999, so it would have been 7 at the time. Hearing that and being like, this is super different than anything else that I've heard, because what I was familiar with is more like rock music at the time, specifically glam and hair metal, since that's what my dad would play a lot around the house. So for me, hearing that completely opposite end of the spectrum, where going from no samples to almost everything is samples, it really kind of gives your head a bit of a shake. I think that's maybe why I ended up getting into neurofunk, harder music on it, because I had both those influences kind of embroiled in my experience of hard, heavy riffs. Like, well, as hard as glam metal is going to be, but you know what I mean. The distorted tones of that, the like hard edge, the whole thing is trying to put off. Then this kind of like almost popcorn bubbly type of thing going on with like commercial pop house music. So I'm very thankful I had all these different influences, and my grandmother was the one who showed me ABBA. Actually, I don't think I can ever get Dancing Queen note for note out of my head. it's burned into so many people's consciousness at this point. But terrific writing on those records, by the way. It's unbelievable how good the production was on those. Same thing with what was the duo that produced Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Those guys made a lot of Janet Jackson songs, among so many other people. I think they have like 500 writing credits or something like that. But it has that kind of feel to it. It's very funky, it's very fresh, but it has disco influences to it. And I think I can hear little hints of that in your music as it goes along, because I think you have more of a melody focus as well.
Absolutely.
You have that ear and mind worm that you can sing to yourself. Because how are you supposed to sing a neurofunk track to yourself? It's just a bunch of loud noises and a bunch of like crazy kicks. Exactly. You know that song that goes it's not gonna work. But if I can think of like, you know, even if we're like like in Preacher, I can hear that right away. I think you have a good ear for picking out stuff that can stand above the rest of the mix. Even if you forget what the whole track sounds like, having the one little thing that you can say, it's like, hey, does anyone know that song? And then you can identify it that way. I think it's a very, very powerful tool, and it's interesting that kind of crept into your influences.
Yeah, that's a really good observation, because it is true. I've always gravitated to strong hooks or themes or little things that you can sing along to. I'm really big on really hooky kind of chords, like the chords you find on old 2 Unlimited, that kind of thing, like minor triads played in a sequence. And you'll probably find that a lot in my music. And that's true. Like the music that we listen, of course, has an influence in what we create, right?
What was your journey towards like jungle and starting to create jungle, and then kind of coming up in the Toronto scene like early on with like Gremlins and those guys?
Great question. I've wondered that myself.
Well, so when I got into house music, I started producing house music first, right? That was my thing, but I didn't know anything about jungle at the moment. But that was around, I think, late 96 when I started messing with Fast Tracker, making house music. But a year and a half after, I started to hear all about this jungle thing. There was a lot of publicity on Goldie's album, like his album Timeless was on Rolling Stones magazine. So I was really intrigued about what is this jungle thing. And then they started to play it on like commercial radio. Like shouts out to MC Flipside and Freaky Flow. They used to have an hour and a half show on Energy 108. For those that remember, hopefully I'm not dating myself. But yeah, Saturday nights, MC Flipside would have this show on primetime radio where he could play whatever he wants, and he would play underground house music, and then Freaky Flow would come on and he would throw down some like hard Amen Raga jungle. I was like, whoa, this stuff's crazy. And then I discovered Medicine Muffin show on Rinse FM. No, not Rinse FM, CKLN. That's Ryerson University's college radio. I think it's now defunct, but Medicine Muffin had his show. It was called the Rinse Out Show. I think that's what it was called. And then I discovered Marcus's show on 89.5 U of T's radio. And so started to get more exposed to jungle that way, and started to buy various compilations such as Metalheads, Reinforce. At first, when I was exposed to hardcore jungle, I actually didn't like it. I was actually taken aback by how extreme, how crazy it was. But it took a few listens for me to understand. But once I understood, I was hooked. I was like, this music is crazy, and I want to make this music.
Wow.
Yeah. I think you were just so inspired, you just had to get in there, right? How am I going to contribute?
There was this almost kind of punk rock vibe to jungle at the time. There's this rebellion kind of vibe where you can do anything you want, you can express yourself. There's no rules in this music. Go hard, go soft, put whatever sounds you want, whatever samples. And I liked that kind of vibe. It fit what I wanted to do at that time, because I was younger, teenage angst, and needed somewhere to output it. So,
what was your decision making around deciding what you wanted to do for your school and your career at that time? Because I feel like maybe we had a slightly similar journey where I was interested in music my whole life, did the thing, but when it came to school and specifically university, I did not go to a music university. I specifically, I went to business school and I did other things, all the while kind of continuing to work on music on the side. But sometimes I think back and should I have gone to music school? And for me personally, I still think the answer is no. I'm glad I ended up doing the journey that I did. But I'm curious for yourself as well. What was your sort of journey there and decision making around music?
So personally, I've always been a little more on the artistic side. Aside from music, I was really into sketching. I used to sketch my own comic book characters and that kind of thing. Before I got into music, I really wanted to be a comic book illustrator. Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane were my heroes when I was a kid. I really wanted to do that. Then later I got into doing music. When I came to making a decision after high school into university, I actually really wanted to get into something more artistic, such as graphic design or something. But me coming from an Asian household, a traditional Chinese household, your educational decisions are more decided upon by your parents, right? I voiced my wishes and my desires, but really the options were business or engineering, right? And so I had a really good talk with one of my mentors, talking about what should I do here, and he advised me, if you take business, it can give you'll have skills that you can be applied to whatever you want to get into later in life. It'll give you general skills on how to conduct yourself and your business. So that I decided, engineering's gonna be really brutal 4 years, might not be into it, versus doing business, bachelor's of commerce, economics, not that into it, but I can do it and still have free time to do my music. So I ended up doing a bachelor's of economics at the U of T. Barely read a single page in my textbooks. Spent most of my time making music. When I was at the lecture halls, I was dozing off, trying to catch up on sleep from the last night, being up at 3 a.m. working on the next Amen track. Really surprised how I was able to graduate, but somehow I was able to get it through and got my degree. I'm very thankful of my parents for supporting me with an education, because an education is important in this day and age. I mean, that could be argued in 2021, but I would say it did give me some understanding of marketing, negotiating. I think my favorite class that I ever took from my tenure at university was Negotiations 101. That was the one class that I found most practical skills that you can actually apply in your life, no matter what you do.
Interesting.
Yeah, negotiation is everything. Everything is technically a negotiation.
Yeah.
You know, you on some sort of microscopic level of what snack will I get out of the cupboard, all the way up to
yeah. Everything.
How do you decide who's going to move what way on the sidewalk? In all matter of fact, your whole life is some sort of negotiation all the time. Yeah. So it's not hard to understand why that might have actually been an interesting course. Yeah. And I had kind of a similar experience with post-secondary education, except I didn't get any sort of what I would call a degree. If anything, going to post-secondary and not getting very far with it a couple of times just showed me why that was not the right direction for me to go, is to sit in a classroom and take all these notes about things I couldn't possibly care less about. Yeah. I needed to be spending my time doing things I was passionate about. Yeah. But in order for me to do that, I had to discover what it was that I was passionate about. Yeah. And for a lot of people, that's a very tricky thing to answer, because we all like stuff. We all like watching TV, but you can't be passionate about watching TV. Yeah. You have to find something that you can do a bit of both with, where there is that relaxing, fun element for you, but that it does serve a meaningful purpose in the world. Yes. And that other people can get enjoyment off of. No one wants to sit here and listen to you recount your favorite TV show. Sorry. But people will be interested if you're on the flyer for a concert, because you're throwing down some cool dubs, or you've got like a new album coming out, or even if you're not, like you're just there to support and play a good show. Yeah. That enables other people to have a really good time, because you're now a audio lubricant for other people's interactions at the venue or the club or wherever you're at, because you're the one setting the atmosphere, and then their memories will sometimes be based entirely upon whatever song that you chose to play that night, and you can have a direct impact on people's lived memory of a show that they went to. Oh, remember that time when I heard that first song? Case in point, first time I heard like Martin's remix of the Ivy Lab tune, Sunday Crunk. Yeah, Memphis' remix of Sunday Crunk was with Calix and TB. And I will always associate that track with Calix and TB now, because that was sort of my first moment hearing a sound like that before. Like, well, are you kidding me? This track is absolutely insane. And shout out for Memphis making such a great tune still. But point is, you can be that catalyst for other people's great memories in a creative and artistic and fun way. So you still have a great time yourself, but everyone's not sharing as part of the great time. So you're not just sort of solipsistically doing this one thing that only you find benefit from, like scrolling around the internet or like watching television or whatever.
And to be fair, there are people who make careers nowadays as content creators talking about their favorite TV shows. I was just gonna say, like being journalists or whatever, with like the top 10, like
you're making a video that you can have like spark a discussion. Yeah. I mean, the wide majority case of you're just kind of letting the entertainment fall onto you. Try to then mirror some value back into the world. If you're taking in this stuff, how can you be a reflection of value?
And I feel like that's the whole crux of like is the $1 million question, and the sort of the tension between, like I guess like Asian households for me as well, like with Russian parents and the sort of the Soviet culture, people coming from Eastern Europe to North America, which is like, yes, you can, this is the classic argument, right? Like, yes, you can like follow your passion, but is it going to make you money? Are you providing value to the world? And like, I feel like that is it's a difficult place to be in, because yes, you need to house yourself and to feed yourself, but you also want to do something that is fulfilling and meaningful. And so I feel like it's such a difficult thing to answer. And I guess for everybody, it is a little bit of a different journey. And I'm also curious, Alan, as well, like, how would you kind of compare what would be the scene as a creative person back then, trying to make it in music, versus kind of now? Like, I feel like things are so different with how people can sort of like educate themselves, as well as create value as creative people, versus like trying to come up back then where like specifically for musicians, you had to get a record deal, or as an artist you had to get a job with like a graphic book company or whatever.
Yeah, I would say what a time it is to be an artist today, because you have so many tools at your disposal that you can really succeed and develop yourself as an independent artist. So I think that's one of the major differences versus today versus against 20 years ago, where you may have to be more reliant on a label to do certain things for you. And you make the music, you have to, I guess, get it signed so you can get the support of a label and then a team to push you. Whereas today, a lot of those various tasks and services can somewhat be automated or done independently. For example, I do a lot of my graphic design with Canva. Canva.com, shouts out, not sponsored.
Not sponsored, yeah. Not yet. Please give us a shout,
yeah. But like back in the day, you would have to do your own graphic design or learn graphic design, but not everyone could afford or get a copy of Photoshop. So you may have to hire a graphic designer, and you may not be able to afford that. So, and having visuals is important, but today it's so accessible to have a nice design. You can access nice templates with services such as Canva, and you can tweak it to make your own. So there's little things like that can really help the independent artists become almost autonomous, right?
Yeah, if you're not, there aren't people gatekeeping you anymore.
Yeah.
You have all of this different opportunity in front of you, because you're right, that having to pay maybe $4,000 or $5,000, like big, really considerable amount of money to do some visual design and art assets, that's within reach of a bigger company. That's not a problem. But if you're having to take that out of your personal budget, that's not always going to be guaranteed that can even make sense for you financially, because how are you going to vet against your product that you're offering making enough money back to you to even make that worth it? You'll never even be able to take the chance on that new product, because it's going to get too trampled down by the overhead and all the expenses of other people that need to get paid first, because you can't be in a million places all at the same time. This is the classic problem that people have, and you're absolutely right. I love the proliferation of cheap, affordable online services, even finding freelancers on Fiverr and things of that nature, have enabled people to not even have to hire an entire staff, but still get the benefits of what would otherwise constitute staff, which is, how do I get someone to figure out this problem? Google it, see if I can find someone to find it. You were just going to Google that problem 20 years ago. I mean, you could have, but you'd get redirected to an ad, to a Yellow Pages thing, where you then call this thing, they'll consult you. You have no idea if they're ripping you off or what they're ripping. You're going to have to spend all day calling all these different services and consultants and whatever else. But now, it couldn't be easier to get your head screwed on straight and figure it out. Okay, well, what is my best approach? You can probably watch a YouTube video on just for an hour on how to do good graphic design for album art or something like that. Like, you can actually grab all of the rudiments of good quality design anywhere and any time So I'm very pleased that this is the direction we're going, because we're really kind of democratizing knowledge as a phrase you've heard before.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not gatekeeping it anymore.
Exactly, almost democratizing the entire industry. So, for example, another aspect of it is creating an audience. Back then, you would have to rely on build on a label or maybe a website to build an audience, right? But now you can create your audience with all these social media tools, in that you can be self-sufficient and create your own following by interacting and building up your following on these various platforms. So
yeah. It's also really interesting that, like, I don't know which is better, and I don't think it needs to be decided, but like nowadays, because it's so accessible and really anybody can do it, at the same time, because it's so accessible, like so many more people are kind of putting themselves out there, following their creative passions, and then it's like still that competitive as a result. And so I wonder, like, now, the thing I appreciate about kind of the sphere of social media and creativity these days is that it does seem that while it's so competitive and there's so many creative people out there, I do like that things like TikTok have shown us that when you're genuine, like that seems to resonate. Whereas like when I kind of compare that, yes, yeah. And I feel like when I compare that to like the big pop artists that I was exposed to when I was growing up in the 90s, and when, you know, every artist is very like curated and packaged by a label to be like super marketable, and you almost don't even know for sure if like, is it that artist or is it they're representing like what the label has sort of like put together. So at least in the sphere of like it being so competitive to be a creative person, at least we can know that like if you're genuine and you're hardworking, like you can push through kind of thing and have a chance at least.
Well, and that is, as you just pointed out, a very great way to look at life in general. We don't like being around fake people or people that are just trying to sell us something or trying to motivate us to do something that only benefits them. And I think this has always been true. But the difference is that the sunlight is now kind of bleaching away all of that negative influence, where now there's a spotlight on everybody at any given time. Anyone can make a viral video at any time that exposes something, that shows like a new technique for something, or just blows your mind, or does something that's unique. That wasn't true before. It was always just a select, curated group of people that were allowed to disseminate the information to you. And you, for the privilege of seeing that, maybe paid $50, $60 a month to look at a very narrow band of content, where I love that for the price of your internet connection now. I mean, I don't even know anyone under 35 who pays cable. It's just we get all of our information now through the World Wide Web. And I think it is a much fairer way to appeal to your own interests and to get the things that you're looking for instead of being force-fed a narrative. And you're absolutely right in that what people crave is realness. They want genuineness. I think that's why people especially connect with STRANJAH's channel, is because how he is in person is not different to how he is on video. He is always genuine, to the point, like a thoughtful, considerate person who just wants to give you the right information and doesn't want to waste your time, and would expect the same of you, by the way. But you can be respectful of his time as well. But it's content creators like Alan that go further than other people, because you can't keep up a charade like that forever. You'll always get a crack that will form. You'll get really popular for some reason. Someone will take a video of you being rude to someone at a restaurant or some sort of unfortunate thing where people can clearly see that this manicured version of how you're trying to present yourself is, in all matter of fact, just a fiction. And you're a puppet over here, but then your real self, this wretched, completely different, underdeveloped type of personality, still exists over here. But if you're putting your best and truest self in the spotlight, you allow yourself to take criticism for your own faults, which, I mean, I think not a lot of people respond very well to, by the way, and you shouldn't be reading negative comments all day. But you at least are given the opportunity to air out some of your own dirty laundry if you so choose, and get real-time feedback on that, where maybe someone you were just talking to on a one-on-one basis might have just thought you're kind of a weirdo or whatever, but they didn't fully maybe say anything to you. But that's the kind of double-edged sword. If you can give people a ton of content, but you can also really embarrass yourself too if you put out some questionable content online that doesn't reflect so nicely on you. But I'll take that over having none of the opportunity anyway, because you miss all the shots you can't take. And fortunately, if you're careful with your time and if you hang around the right people and you influence yourself in healthy ways, there is an immense amount of opportunity for you to help other people get value from your content, but also for you to meet great people too through content and develop relationships that wouldn't normally be possible. We had a conversation about this of a lot of your shows are call-in shows where people will be not physically situated anywhere, even reasonably in your proximity, but you can still make the show happen.
Oh, like on Zoom.
Yeah, on Zoom. They'll have the cameras and microphones all set up whenever they email it to you after, but you couldn't do that show unless you had the relationships that only were formed through your creative work through the internet. Right. But both those things had to happen. You had to be a genuine person who was easy to work with and who made good content, but also use the network and infrastructure that everyone else who you also had to vet for being genuine and honest and creative and all that type of thing. But really, genuineness shows, and once again, it proves if you can be a great person who's motivated, it's very unlikely that you won't find some momentum somewhere. But if you have to be coming about it from the right approach, and I feel like I hear all the time, well, why isn't this working out for me? I can't help but ask myself, are you being genuine? Are you really trying to give people value, or are you trying to find someone who's just going to help you? Right? Because are you really asking me, like, is it not that things are popping off for you? Is that, have I not met someone who is just going to do all the work for me and pick my own bootstraps up? I can't help but wonder. It's probably not the case for everybody, but you have to always be honest with your intentions and want to help other people as much as you want to be helped. But that's how things start popping off for content.
Popping off. Speaking of popping off, you like my segue there?
That's a great segue.
Thank you. Alan, I'm curious how you kind of approached starting Deviant Audio back in 2016 and sort of what kind of came, like how did that come about? Why did you decide to do that? And
yeah, so I was just really wanting or struggling with finding an outlet for my music, and I found that perhaps my sound didn't fit certain labels. I tried really hard to get my tunes out to various different platforms, but it seemed like it wasn't resonating. Perhaps it wasn't the vibe that they were looking for, and decided that perhaps it's time to create my own platform where I can decide what I want to put out. I don't need to steer towards a sound that someone else wants. I can explore something my own way and have kind of creative freedom to express myself in my own way. So I think that's what was the initial feeling, is just wanting to put music out, having no platform. Well, why don't I create my own platform? And I was ruminating over this for many days and even weeks, and also wondering what's the name I should go for. And one morning, you just get one of those light bulb kind of eureka thoughts, and the first word, it wasn't deviant, but it was devious. I was like, devious, that sounds interesting. It's leading to something. And then thinking about that a little more, it developed into deviant, and I thought that kind of makes sense because my music doesn't really fit anywhere else. So perhaps I'm deviating from the norm. I'm exploring, I'm pushing boundaries, or pushing myself and exploring different boundaries, right? So I think it just seemed to fit the kind of personal ethos of what I was doing as an artist, and I was also around a number of artists and friends who made music that I wanted to support, and wanted to create this platform so we could all put music out on there. And that's kind of how Deviant Audio came about.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I like how genuine the roots are of that too. Is that you weren't coming at it from like, well, how can I possibly milk every dollar out of whatever sort of, nothing like that. You had a great library of music that you felt needed to be heard.
Yeah.
A difficult process of trying to find anyone who would take it.
Yeah.
And a lot of talented friends that you had that were making amazing content who they too were, for one reason or another, couldn't find themselves in front of an audience that you knew that they would love, but they just can't quite break through.
Yeah.
All right, I'll fix it myself.
Yeah.
And then so began Deviant Audio. And I think that was easily one of the top 5 best decisions you've ever made.
Thank you, man.
To make Deviant Audio, because it really has already had such a noticeable impact in the content sphere of music that's available and of creative endeavors that we're slowly getting into that I think are really going to help people in a big way.
Yeah, we're trying to make a small little dent in that universe by doing our best and trying to put a good vibe up there.
I do want to talk a little bit about kind of the future of Deviant, and the three of us know we've been hard at work for the last few months kind of working towards that, and don't want to give too much away, but I love that was the origin story of Deviant, because I didn't even know that. I just always kind of had this feeling that this is something that like I believe in what you're doing, and I love the sound of the label and just your kind of curation and your kind of way of doing business, of being a creative and nice person. And it's just one of those things where like I just want to support you and what you're doing with Deviant. And so I'd love to maybe if you could maybe hint a little bit at what's coming in the future for Deviant.
Yeah, we're really excited for some plans that will be executed and are being executed behind the scenes in the coming weeks or months. What I can say generally is that we're going to be offering some amazing stuff to support artists out there. We're going to be providing something that if you're looking to grow and you need a space to grow, that kind of thing, you need support, we're going to be we're working on something really cool where we can support those people you guys that are interested in getting into music, you guys that want to grow and develop your skills, anyone that wants to meet like-minded people. We're working on something really cool.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I think the thoughtful among you should be able to put 2 and 2 together there, I think. But I'm really looking forward to that exact thing, because I think our ability to help artists through the plans that we're working on is going to be hugely increased by doing this. And that's really what's exciting to me, because that's kind of the whole messaging of your channel, really. Is being able to bring good tools and assets and thought, like sort of mind state type of things, all of those, the things you can hold and the things you can't, all into one place of how can we help artists. And I like that that's a continuation on the whole theme of what the STRANJAH brand even is, or the STRANJAH universe is.
Exactly. So for those that don't know, my personal mission is to help anyone that wants to succeed in music. I want to provide you guys tools, skills, and resources so that you can succeed in the realm of dance music or electronic music. But whatever I show can be applied to pretty much any genre or style that you choose. A lot of the knowledge is a little more general. So that is my personal mission, and it only makes sense that Deviant Audio is an extension of my personal brand, and really awesome to have these 2 amazing people here that resonate with that mission and goal.
Yeah, I think it's really special to me that we've been able to become a team through the forces of us initially meeting Anna, then realizing that she was willing and able to help along with that cause, and now all 3 of us are in completely distinct ways pushing that forward, where none of us are really overlapping at all. Like we have our own little niche that we can tackle onto, and that is as good as being at 3 places at once. Where the growth of something can only happen as fast as the people that are working on it and the people that are supporting it. So anytime little stuff like Deviant merch. Please feel free to check out Deviant merch. And in all matter of fact, right, like that kind of thing, ground up support, buying things through Bandcamp, like direct sort of sales, stuff like that. It's just us.
Liking the post, commenting, send an emoji.
We're not some big corporation or something like that. Like it really just is us trying to bring you the best stuff that we know how to do. And so it really genuinely, we mean it when every cent that you can find to support us is hugely important. And I love that through that momentum that Alan has been able to just absolutely explode onto the YouTube space with and really get that going, that we've been able to help people and figure out new ways that we can help people too, not just, scrape by and just barely figure out how, maybe in 5 years we can do some sort of thing like that, nothing of the sort. So that's been really, really amazing to see. Big up to Alan for your amazing growth and your ability to pivot and create new, interesting content for people to enjoy.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
So normally to wrap up the podcast, I ask my guest if there's something that they wish they knew as a kid or what piece of advice they would impart on the youths of today. But because this is a special triangle podcast, what I'd like to do is actually ask each of you. So Tyr, what is one thing that you've learned from Alan that has been extremely significant and helpful in your life? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, how do I just point to one thing?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, Alan, I might end up answering your question in a nice, neat way. I think it would be fair to say that I have really, how do I just give you one nice point on that? There's been a huge amount of content. I'll say this. I think it's been really important that Alan has been able to teach me, and by extension a lot of other people, the value of just being tuned in and understanding where people's potential can lie and never taking something for granted if you can at all help it. You never know who the next person or the next big thing is going to be, so don't ever assume that you know everything, and always be willing to take input and criticism. Don't take it to heart, but just understand, as he was alluding to before, that this is just opening up a dialogue. It's not necessarily that this is you're wrong and I'm right, because that person who's giving you feedback is always right. But it's more that being willing to adapt and change has been something that I feel like was really jump-started through Alan. And I've tried to apply that same thing. Okay, well, how can I not only do that, but also try to be available to help other people where, if at all, I can in my own microscopic way, because Alan has always been very receptive to, if I send him demos, if I just asking for advice or just, shooting the breeze, whatever, just having a conversation, he pretty much always responds to me as soon as he possibly can. And I think that him making the time for that conversation or that input or that thing, I've tried to mirror in my own life of, even if it's inconvenient, I really will try to make the time for someone else just to make sure that they know that they're being heard. Because every person really is an individual. Not everyone's out to be your best friend or to help you, but a lot of great, genuine, and honest people do exist out there, and you have to try to give people the time of day to shine and to really show you their potential. So I know it's not like a one soundbite that I can give you, but that, generally speaking, I feel like has been probably top 3 things that I've been able to sort of become more aware of through Alan, is that like camaraderie thing and really just being open to new ideas. That's been very important for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely learned something similar from you. I feel like you really embody the something that I've heard Gary Vee say a lot over the last couple of years, and I know there's people out there that have different varying opinions about Gary Vee. For me, he's been very helpful as a creator, and one of the things he says is always be giving value. Give as much value as you can to all the people around you and to the people of the world, even if you're not, with zero expectation of getting anything back. Just give as much value as you possibly can, and then maybe once in a while ask for something back, but don't do the whole thing of like, especially like as a business or an influencer or whatever, every single post is like, I'm selling something or whatever. No, like you really have to make it your mission in life to provide as much value as possible. And so, you know, Alan, you've been the only person really I've seen kind of fully embody that, and you give so much value to so many people, like even just on your YouTube content alone. Like I can't believe all those videos are free, and like how many people you've been able to help, not just with the content itself that you're providing, but also how quickly you're able to disseminate information. I know that a lot of the feedback that people will often like leave comments on your stuff is like, you know, yes, I was able to hear this in like somebody else's tutorial, but that one was 2 hours and Alan's was 5 minutes. And so I just think you're doing so much for people, and I do really thank you for that. And I hope that, you know, you continue to succeed in that space, because you have grinded and worked so hard towards this. And I know that it's been such a challenge, and I've just been so grateful that things have been really like growing for you over the last couple of years.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say that, and that's very kind of you to say those words, Tyr. And what I would say about that is it comes from a space of self-discovery and humility and understanding your role in this world. Sometimes you may want a certain thing, but the universe wants something out of you, something else. And that's how you find that's how you find your role and how you can provide a value into the world. Sometimes we want things this way, so I can have this. But sometimes I think it's repositioning how you relate to the world at large, and who you are, what you have to offer, and how, as you said earlier in this conversation, how can that be meaningful and of value to the rest of the world. And most of the time, at first we're resistant about it, but once you let go and say, okay, I'm gonna go with this, you actually find out, oh, this is actually fulfilling, and this is what I want to do. So really thank you for your encouragement and your kind words and your support. Now, back to you, Tyr. I think we're always learning from each other when we're together, whether we're in the studio or out at a shoot, just working. I think one of the main things that stood out to me was your work ethic. Something about that focus and drive once you have a goal to push, and 80% is never good enough for you. It's always about pushing your threshold. That inch more is what makes that product a standard product versus something that's outstanding, that's out there, right? That's one of the main things that I've learned personally from you, is that when you think something is good enough, it may not be. Push a little further. Push that extra 10, 15, 20%. Get it over to 110%. Because once you push it and you get there, you realize it was worth the effort, because the end result is a lot better. So that's one of the main personal ethos that I got from you, that I found was very helpful, and I've adopted it in how I work as well. So really,
that's great.
Really appreciative of that.
And I like that this is sort of the atmosphere that we all have here, is that we understand where each other's value can be, and we're never so, what would the word be? Like, you're so kind of egotistical to never think that you can be just a little bit better every day in whatever direction that is. And I think that attitude of, well, maybe if it isn't like a product that I'm designing that can be 10% better, but how can it be a 10% better human being?
Yeah, exactly. It works all levels of life.
Correct. Or how can I help people 10% more today, or something like that. And I think we've sort of both said more or less the same thing about each other in different ways, which is that how are we always taking input and then giving it back even a little bit more to other people. And I really like that, because it shows like a good like eye level conversation that happens between all of us. I never feel like any one of us are ever talking down to each other or ever feeling that we're above or even below for that matter, that, well, I don't really deserve to be in this friend group because I'm not X or I'm not Y. We're very different people, all aligned around similar goals. And that's the most important step, is you can get along with people and you can understand that they too want just as bad as you do to succeed and to do something meaningful and to change the world in a positive way. And how we're doing that is constantly evolving. Like, our game plan is never one thing. It's a bunch of check marks that we just put on a list. We're coming up with new ideas all the time. Or you might ask me a question of like, well, how would you make this sound? Or I might ask you a question of like, how would you approach X? Or even just, here's a cookie idea. I'll just fire it off to you, just because like you want to make your best self available all the time. You don't send someone an idea for the expectation of like, as you were saying before, like that Alan's going to directly compensate me for that financially. Of like, here's a little idea I had. Maybe you might find it helpful or maybe useful, that kind of thing. You just want to be there to give your best input and information to the people in your life because you genuinely care about them. And sometimes you can action that idea. Of like, for example, here's maybe some sort of content idea I was floating in my head. It might be a cool video for 6 months down the line. I have no idea. I have no ability to really action it at this time, but I know he can maybe do it, or that it might get incorporated into the content he's already, but it's, actually, I was already kind of working on this. Maybe I can just slot that in because I didn't think about this little aspect of it. Or the same thing of, did you think about it in your track that you should maybe try to do this, or flip this arrangement around or do something else with it, because as an external observer, I'm not really hearing where it's at, or even for mastering, like the old one was where it was at because of X, Y, Z reason. Maybe you're overthinking it and trying to overbake the idea, but we're always looking out for each other and trying to make sure that we're always at our peak and our best, and never doing it in a way that feels crooked or lopsided, that we are really just trying to help each other out. And it's a very special thing, and I wish that everyone watching this can find and has, relationships like that in their lives, because there's no replacement for just feeling like everyone can be at peace with each other and that everyone's got each other's back. I'm never going to be able to get too far off the beaten path because I know that either one of you will probably notice it and then steer it back, and same sort of thing. So it's a very interesting and a very special and unique place that we find ourselves in, that we all can work truly well and truly not like forced to be a team. We just want to work with each other because we understand each other's value.
Well, this was a very special conversation and episode.
I haven't said what I've learned about you yet.
Oh, you guys want to do it on me? Oh no.
So one thing I've learned from you is your cheerful approach to life. And I think this is important in that one should never take oneself too seriously, and that works on all levels. Whether you're working in the studio, we've talked about that. It's about having fun and being spontaneous, or just being out there in life. You gotta enjoy life. So I really love that you bring this energy of joyfulness and cheerfulness, because that's really important. Because sometimes we forget that you have to appreciate this moment and be grateful of it. So that's one of the things that stood out to me when I first met you, and really thankful to have friends like that to remind yourself that things can be okay. You can appreciate life. So really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. I'm so grateful that that's sort of the vibe that you get from me. And, I've might have talked about this on the podcast before, that like, I have had my journey with, and still continuing my journey with, sort of like, working through depression and mental health issues, addiction past, and that sort of thing. And so whenever I hear people's feedback that the vibe that I give to them is like positive, is like really means a lot to me, because it's kind of one of my main goals as a human, and in my content and creativity as well, which is like, I've experienced so much negativity and like judgment and that kind of thing through my life, that like I really don't want to convey that to other people. And so I definitely really, really do my best to be cheerful, and it does come from like a positive place. Like I remember growing up, whenever I'd come across cheerful people, I was often very cynical of like, oh, they're just like faking it, or they're like delusional or whatever. But only much later did I kind of realize that like, no, that's such a blessing when you can sort of have that energy. And so I do my best to kind of cultivate that and hang on to it. And certainly, you know, you see me on my worser moments and stuff that like that's not always the case.
Yeah.
So I really extra appreciate that, like that's kind of what you pick up from me, because that's
and sometimes it has to be a choice. Although things aren't okay, I can choose to feel this way right now, right? That's not to say you shouldn't honor what you're feeling right now. You should honor all your palettes of emotion. But when it comes down to it, you can choose how you feel and respond to a situation.
That is very true. That's very powerful knowledge as well. Now, I can tell you that it's very seldomly that you can just decide you're not going to be upset or happy about something. Sometimes it's inappropriate to be happy, and sometimes inappropriate to be sad. You just have to kind of understand what is causing these feelings. Is it just a character flaw, or is it maybe that's exactly the right thing, but it's not obvious why? Sometimes that kind of thing is only revealed to you later in life, where you're not going to have the answer right this very second of why am I feeling this confusing feeling about this particular instance, right? I can only be so vague because that's kind of a broad sweeping thing. But you're absolutely right, is that you have to be aware of your reactions to stuff. And if you choose to exude confidence and positivity, chances are that's going to make its way back into your life. You can't just not have that come back to you if you're constantly of positivity, and I would completely agree with the sentiment. And what I would say, sort of on a similar note, of like, it would be only right for me to then sort of also say like, what would be something important that I've learned from you? There's a smile. No, it is something just very similar of always making sure that you are seizing opportunities to enjoy good moments that are in front of you, because not all of life is completely constituent of work. And I think likewise we've kind of tempered each other in that way of, I do have the kind of work focus sort of thing of like, we really do need to do everything that is foundational before we can appreciate the fruits of our labor. And likewise, that you can't think that just because something is not 1,000,000% done, that you can't maybe take a second to appreciate the things that you've already done, or the things that people have done for you, or something in between there. It's the just respect for enjoying the moments as they come along, as fleeting as they can be. If it's just the 5 seconds of like, this turned out great, I'm really happy about that, instead of wondering to yourself, well, this project is done, I'm really anxious now because life is all distorted, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, and I feel so alive. Like, that's completely the wrong way to think about creativity, in my opinion, is that you shouldn't be just constantly stressed about what your next source of inspiration is going to be. Sometimes you do need to be thankful for the things that have gone right. And ask yourself, why did that go right? Because there's probably some good information in there that you're just skipping over. You know, oh, this thing went right. How am I going to figure out the next thing? Well, what made the first thing go really well? How can you continue in that sort of pathway? And I think that was something that I was missing in my perspective before, is maybe understanding why things were going right and doing a little more thorough audit of what are the things that I'm thankful, why was I thankful for those things, ruminating on those thoughts, and by extension, I think that has invited a lot more positivity into my own life. And so I'm very thankful that you've been able to help us both really understand the value of just, you know, not being unreasonably hopeful or cheery or whatever it is about things, but like taking the necessary time that things deserve and giving them their credit where it's due, when either you did a good job yourself or when someone around you did a good job, like celebrating success, as I think is probably a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Oh, guys. Well, okay, so I'll quickly also talk about what I've learned from you two, and then we can just like pat all of each other on the back.
I think you gave your feedback on me, so I think the spot's on too.
All right. Well, I was actually going to mention this earlier, so I'm glad it kind of came up again in a different way. But we were talking earlier about how you know, sometimes you think that like the work that you've done is like your best work, and now it's like behind you. And this is one of the things that was a very significant learning that I had from you early on, which was so when I first started working with Tyr, it was mainly in the context of he was recording and editing all of my vocal projects, and he saw me go through the kind of experience of like, okay, I've recorded a vocal for this drum and bass instrumental. The producer ended up only using a quarter of the vocal, or the label didn't like it and didn't use the vocal at all. And so I had a lot of these experiences of like taking it really personal, of like, oh, but that was so good, and how come they didn't like it and they didn't use it, and I worked so hard and I spent weeks on this. And then also the feeling of like, well, that was the best thing I've ever done, and I'm never gonna have something as good as that, and it was like wasted. And so just like a lot of those, I guess, kind of amateur feelings of, this is my best work and I'm never going to get better. Meanwhile, little did I know that like really I'm just getting started, and the more I iterate and work on, I'm actually going to get better. So maybe that felt like it was my best at the time, but really if I keep working, I'm going to get better. And so kind of like learning to like let things go and not take things personally, and just as Alan was saying about your like hard work ethic, just keep working at it, because often things just come with more time and more experience, and art is subjective. You can't take things personal all the time, and so often your best work is actually ahead of you and not behind you, and I certainly see more of that now.
Yeah.
So
always try to have that perspective of your best work is yet to come, and never think that you've peaked just because you did do a really good job on something like that. That might be true, but you've got so much more left in you, so much more left in the tank, even if it isn't clear to you how that might be, because your next source of inspiration isn't just like a quick song and dance away. Like sometimes you have to really shake up your life in a big way to find that, extra lint in the jar. But there is always something in there for you to give, but it's never going to be easy because you're going to mine that first. Like, what's my easiest inspiration? That's going to start to kind of wear away, but you don't know how thick that wall is going to go. That could be really, really deep, but you have to forcibly push yourself to go further and further into these unexplored territories to discover where your true level of art is. And that's probably not even a valid question. It's more like, how far can I push my own craft outside of where I was comfortable to encompass the largest array of influence and the largest amount of skill and prowess that I can kind of have over all these different domains in artistic endeavors. And maybe that's kind of the core of the issue where people lose their wind, is that you can lose your wind, but you're out of easy options now. I just discovered how good reverb sounds. Now my whole track is gonna, very simple example, but like maybe you're learning Serum or like some sort of synth or something like that, make 50, 60, 70, 80 good sounds out of it, and then you feel like, well, that's it, I just can't write any more music. But it's the case really is that you just have to find more innovative ways to feel that same inspiration. But yeah, absolutely. It was a tangent, but I thought it was relevant to bring up.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, to anyone that thinks that your best music is behind you, that just means you decided to stop learning. And are you saying that you can't learn new things? I actually don't believe that an old dog can't learn new tricks. The brain is able to learn new things. What we call neuroplasticity. You can create new connections. So don't think that you can't learn new things. Be open to learn and grow, and you're going to keep growing and making new stuff. So like just have an approach to life where you want to keep discovering new things. The world is so big, you're never going to learn everything, which is what is so exciting about this journey, is that the growth and learning does not end, and that's really the way to go.
Absolutely. And having the humility to admit to yourself that you can't know everything. And I've kind of adopted that recently into my mantras of, I will always start by saying, firstly, I don't know everything. I don't even know a lot. I know kind of what I know. And based on that, here's what I think. Of really taking the most humble approach that you possibly can, because it's true, you don't know anything. Like, in the second you crack open a subject that you're unfamiliar with, it's like, oh boy, this is really tough. I don't know anything about it. But you're also absolutely right. There's no reason why you can't just decide you're going to learn a new skill. I learned a new language starting when I was 26, and that I think has gone pretty well. But the sort of idea that I think people have told themselves that their opportunity to learn stuff is when they're a kid. And they live that out as a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, it's not possible for me to learn new things past when I'm 30 or past when I'm 50 or however old people are that are watching. I think really every day is an opportunity. And I don't think you ever outgrow opportunity, personally. And so I think you kind of owe it to yourself to not keep repeating that same sort of destructive mantra of, I'm too old for X. It's, you know, I'm not inspired enough is probably maybe a more fair way to say it to yourself, but that kind of sucks to say because then you can't blame something else. You know, oh, well, this external factor that's immutable to me that I can't take back, that must be the reason why I can't do that. And it's probably not being fair to yourself. You're undervaluing your ability as an artist to grow and to learn. Like, I'm not even sitting here trying to like say, oh, you're not doing a good job. It's more like give yourself more credit. You can totally do that but you've decided you can't because you've come to think that these things you have no control over are going to govern your destiny. It's sort of like, you know, the thing of like people that are 30 and still feel like their parents control every aspect of their lives. Like, how do I get my parents to stop controlling me? It's like, well, you live on your own, you make your own money, you drive yourself to work, you have your own relationship, maybe a girlfriend. They don't control your life. I think the difference is that you've let that mindset come into play of like, no, these people really do control my life. I'm not actually controlling myself. Like the voices in your head are the ones at the wheel when, if you just look around you, you are in fact in control. And never let yourself outgrow opportunity. Is kind of how I would sum it up. It's so important to be willing to just try that next new thing because you never know where that's going to take you. You might meet amazing people. You might do something amazing. I don't know. But afford yourself the opportunity.
Well said.
Well said. Well said.
Now we'll just be like King of the Hill, like, yeah.
Well, I think this was great. I'm so glad we were able to make this happen, and thank you guys for being willing to kind of do this. And I'm really glad we're sort of up here doing our little retreat. I know both of you work so hard, and we're often, you know, kind of toiling in our studios, and so it's nice to be able to kind of just get out and do our best to get a little bit away from technology by setting up more technology just in nature.
Why get away from technology when the technology can come to us?
Yeah. But thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for the hospitality. Thanks for everything that you guys do. This amazing setup. Really honored to be in this gracious space.
Thanks,
you.
Alan.
Yeah, big up for wanting to make it all possible and giving us the time of day to just spout off about how great we all think each other are. And this is, and I said it in the last show too, this is a great thing you have going on. I'm sure Alan have tons of opinions about that as well, but I think what you're doing here is important work, and it is allowing people to hear from people that they wouldn't normally hear from in that capacity, where we can see a different side of that person that we're not normally exposed to. Like I talk to Alan all the time. Like I see that thing, but that's not, like, Alan can't hang out with everybody. And I think it's great that all these different artists that you know, that you can let them talk to people as well and give everyone this kind of one-on-one take, or I guess 3-on-3 or whatever you want to say, but take on just kind of how we think about life and how we think about work and music and art in general. So I think what you're doing here is important work, and I'm glad that you're continuing to push this show along because I think it's worth doing.
Thanks. I mean, I'm also just trying to have fun with it and trying to keep that thing in mind of, like, you know, not everything I have to do has to have like a total, like, you know, financial benefit at the end of the day, or like some sort of serious like artistic objective. Like I definitely have my objectives with this podcast and creating these kinds of conversations, but I'm also just grateful that by doing this, you know, we've kind of captured a moment in time, and, you know, 50 years from now we can like look back
That's
and be
true.
like, oh, look at
show my grandchildren.
But that said, for you folks watching and listening, thank you so much for being here with us. I'm going to have social media links for all of us in the description. If you want this jungle t-shirt, comes in lots of different colors. This is actually Strange's merch. Got a Deviant cap over here as well. But also if you just want to follow, subscribe, like, share, that whole thing, that it really goes a long way. And hopefully this brought you some inspiration, some comfort, some joy, some laughs, hopefully not tears, unless they're happy tears. Thank you so much for being here with us, and sending you lots of love. Take care.